탐 네이튼 회장님은 1988년에 창립 20주년이죠. 그 MIT 대 교수로 재직을 하시면서 CDN이라고 하는 이런 업계와 기술을 창시하셨습니다. 창시하셨고 그때 만든 그런 네트워크가 아까 말씀드린 137개 국가에 그 다음에 3,900개 팝에 숫자가 좀 줄게 나왔는데 24만 대 서버에 지금 문산 설치되는 전 세계 최고의 그런 딜리버리 플랫폼 회사로 저희들이 성장을 해왔고요. 그 다음에 명예 전당 그 등재가 되셨고 다수의 그 특허를 가지고 계시다고 합니다. 그리고 여기 있는 대로 미국 컴퓨터학회 알고리즘 복잡성 이론 연구 그 의장을 역임하고 계시고 그리고 현재도 그 MIT 응용수학과 그 석좌 교수를 역임하고 계십니다. 자, 오늘 이 자리를 위해서 특별히 방한해 주신 우리 탐 네이튼 회장님을 힘찬 박수로 맞아 주시기 바랍니다.
Thanks very much, Wuhan. Thank you. And thank you all for joining us today. Today I'm going to talk about how the internet is evolving, and in particular, how it's beginning to morph from a cloud-centric model into a model where there's more activity and functionality being placed at the edge of the internet, near the last mile, close to the end user. And we'll talk about what this means for your businesses and digital experiences. You know, a lot of people are starting to talk about this transformation. These are some of the recent analyst reports from the leading firms, and you can see they have some pretty catchy titles. The era of the cloud's total dominance is drawing to a close. Edge is eating away at the cloud, and the data center is going to benefit. Cloud's new life on the edge, and Gartner saying the edge is going to eat the cloud. Pretty dramatic titles. In fact, it's possible the edge will become the next big buzzword, you know, on the internet. We always like buzzwords at the internet, in the internet. Now, of course, at Akamai, we have been building infrastructure and capabilities at the edge for 20 years. And this gives us a great platform that, you know, we can use to help you grow your businesses online as more of your functionality moves to the edge. Now, there's several forces that are causing functionality to move from the cloud or the core to the edge. And today I'm going to focus on why being at the edge matters for media, video over the top, for performance, for cybersecurity, IoT, and blockchain, starting with media. Now, when it comes to media, it's all about scale, quality, and cost. OTT is still in its very early days, but I think most major broadcasters around the world today believe that the large majority of viewing will someday take place online. In fact, one of the world's largest broadcasters told me recently that in their long-range plans, they are now planning to stop using satellite altogether within the next 10 to 15 years. Now, the move to OTT has challenges, starting with quality. You know, a few years ago, viewers would tolerate a lower quality picture or occasional rebuffering, but those days are long gone. Now that viewers are paying for OTT services, it needs to be better than traditional TV, with a high quality picture and uninterrupted viewing. And it needs to start up instantly on any device, anywhere. Now, to make matters even more difficult for today's online broadcasters, they've got to worry about cost and capacity challenges with streaming over the internet, especially for large live events or linear streaming. Now, this was never a problem with traditional broadcast, since once you paid for the satellite, which was expensive, and once you got the signal reliably to the satellite with 5 nines, you were done. You didn't have to worry about cost. Every additional user was free, and there might be the occasional thunderstorm in a neighborhood, but otherwise, it just always worked. You didn't have to worry about things like flash crowds on the internet. Now, today, the more successful you are, the more you have to worry. And based on the traffic growth we're seeing, many of you and many of our customers are becoming very successful. 2008 is when we launched our HD video network at Akamai, and that's when our traffic first reached a terabit per second. Now, this seemed like a really big deal in 2008, and we were pretty excited about it back then. Now, to put a terabit per second in context, that's the amount of traffic you would have to have 1 million people simultaneously watch a stream at a bit rate of 1 megabit per second. All right, so only 1 million people. Now, 1 megabit per second is not as good as standard definition TV. You know, the old standard definition TV takes about 2 to 3 megabits per second once you do compression on it. So this wasn't even good enough to get up to old TV standards. So 1 million people at less than standard def TV. Now, of course, a lot has changed since 2008. In fact, this past summer with the World Cup that Buhan mentioned, we had games with over 20 terabits per second of traffic just for the game. And today, we are routinely delivering over 60 terabits per second. Starting last year was the first time we did that, and now it's routine. Now, to put that in context, that's how much traffic you'd need if you had 15 million people watching a stream encoded at 4 megabits per second after compression. Now, 4 meg is a little bit better than standard def TV, and at the low end of DVD, not Blu-ray, DVD. So already an old standard. 4 meg is at the low end of that. So again, these aren't very big numbers, even though 60 terabits a second sounds like a really big number, and it is on the internet today. Now, the question on everybody's mind in the industry is, where does this go from here? What's in the future? And, you know, you could think about that and say, well, you know, already we've had 2.5 billion people watch a video online. Well, what if 2.5 billion people did that every night during prime time? That you really converted video watching to go over the top. And suppose they watched at 10 megabits per second. Now, today, 10 megabits per second is the standard that people are looking to do on the internet. It's not always achieved. It's, you know, halfway to 4K. Nowhere's near 8K. Doesn't do AR, doesn't do VR. All right, but it is, you know, better than DVD, and it's where people are striving to broadcast today online. So say you had 2.5 billion people in their local prime times at 10 megabits per second. So, you know, that would seem to be reasonable. That's 25,000 terabits per second. And that's why a lot of the broadcasters and carriers are freaked out when it comes to the future of OTT. Vast amounts of traffic, and there's just no way the internet by itself keeps up with that. And it, you know, forces the issue of, well, what's going to happen as we really start to have OTT adoption? It's a huge challenge, and it's something that we put a lot of effort into with our Edge platform. So if you look at the internet, the first misconception is that you've got capacity constraints in the edge, or the last mile. A lot of people think that. It used to be that way. It is not that way today in the developed world. Now, it's impossible to measure it exactly, but roughly speaking, there's about close to 1 billion last mile connections around the world, and at an average of about 40 megabits per second. Now here, in Seoul, your average is probably close to a gigabit a second or hundreds of megabits per second, you know, in Seoul. But not all cities have, you know, are as equipped with infrastructure as well as Seoul is. Pretty much now in the US, I would say the average is at least 40 in the US today. But say you take those numbers and you multiply them, you find that the capacity in the edge of the internet, the connection into homes and offices and schools, in aggregate is measured in tens of thousands of terabits per second. That means there is enough capacity at the edge to be thinking about a world where everybody, or at least in all the developed locations, watch video online. The problem is in the core, in the cloud. This is where many people think about broadcasting the video from. And for every person that's watching a video at home, there has to be some server sending that video. And if you place those servers in the cloud data centers, the big cloud providers, you've got a problem. You know, today, there's a couple ways you can measure the capacity in the cloud or the core. One is by looking at the major networks and their backbone capacity or peering capacity. The other is looking at the major cloud data centers and their transit capacity. And either way, you get a number that will someday grow to be hundreds of terabits per second. Today, there's a couple dozen major carriers in the world, maybe 3 dozen tier 1 networks, far less than 100. And their backbone capacity in the core, far less than 5 terabits a second. But giving room for growth, you find the core capacity is measured in hundreds of terabits per second in the future. That creates a problem. There's a huge disbalance between the bandwidth at the edge and the bandwidth in the cloud or the core. And this creates problems that we're seeing even today as people try to watch popular videos or popular sporting events online. If those events are broadcast from the cloud or the core data centers, you get massive congestion and it fails. And often it doesn't fail in the data center. It actually fails in the internet, in the peering points, in the vicinity of the data center. In fact, a lot of times you think you can buy capacity in your data center, but it's not real. I mean, sure enough, the pipe comes in and it's a pipe at 100 gig and you've got a router at 100 gig, but it gets congested in the peering points as you try to get the traffic to end users. Now, ironically, as the edge improves and grows capacity, and as we deploy 5G, you have more capacity at the edge. People think they're going to start watching higher quality videos at the edge. They want to exploit that capacity. It puts even more pressure on the core and makes the end result even worse. You know, this exact problem was very noticeable in countries here in Asia during the World Cup, where in some cases, local broadcasters were using big cloud providers to deliver it and had spectacular failures. Akamai ended up with our edge network delivering almost all the World Cup here in Asia, and including when the big cloud companies failed, we would pick up the traffic on our edge network. And this is exactly why we built the Akamai Edge platform. We place our servers at the edge of the internet where there is a ton of capacity, so you don't get caught up and congested in the core. And this is why Gartner says the edge is going to eat the cloud. It's the only way to scale video delivery on the internet. Now, today, Akamai places their servers, as Buhan said, in thousands of locations in over 130 countries, close to the end users. So when you want to watch a video that's carried by Akamai or a sporting event, you just go across the last mile, and we're delivering that video to you. And it also means if we're closer, you can get a higher bandwidth stream and a better quality video that's more reliable. Now, going forward, we're also placing our software on user devices, in homes and in offices. And when we do that, we can further improve the quality. We can change the protocols that are used. We can get rid of the latency, the startup latency in a video. Typically, if you're watching a video online of a sporting event, it's delayed from the satellite broadcast, often by up to a minute. But using Akamai's latest software capabilities, we can actually make it be delivered over the internet faster than traditional satellite methods, which means that, again, the internet has to be better, and we're making it better than TV. All right, next I want to talk a little bit about performance. You know, and being at the edge makes a big difference for your app performance. Not only can you avoid the congestion, which clogs stuff up in the internet, but if you're closer to the end user, the latency is going to be lower, and you can provide a much faster experience and really get to be near instant, even in the most challenging environment for mobile devices and congested cellular networks. And this is why, especially in commerce or in travel and in banking, where the applications are really important to business, the leading brands turn to Akamai because they want their apps to be fast. And when their apps are fast, more orders are placed, more business is done online. Their customers are happier with the brand. Here's a case study with AliExpress, where in their mobile application, we made it 36% faster, and that increased their orders by 10% and increased their conversion rate by 27%. And they have happier customers doing more business on AliExpress because we make the app be faster. And that's a huge impact for their business. And now, as Buhan mentioned, in the last year, we've added a lot more functionality for our performance customers on the Edge, the Akamai Edge platform. Mpulse, which gives real user monitoring tools to help you optimize the performance of your site, to focus your energy on that part of the site that will deliver the most value to you. API Gateway, so your APIs can be located and scaled on the edge. Image Manager, and very soon, Video Manager is coming. Many of you have short video clips now on your commerce sites, your travel sites. Users demand that. That's even more overhead on the site, and so we're bringing to market a product that optimizes your short-form videos in the same way we did for your images. Script management, again, helps eliminate single points of failure for your site, as you've got all sorts of third-party scripts on your site now. And for DevOps, having performance and container support for your developers so that they can manipulate the site, make changes to it in a fast, easy, and safe way. All now becoming available on the Akamai Edge platform. And also want to mention that our DevOps World Tour is coming here to Seoul on November 22nd. And we've been delighted to have you and your developers join us for that event. Okay, now I'm going to say a few words about security. You know, today, pretty much everything depends on the internet. And unfortunately, that means that pretty much everything is vulnerable. You know, the scale and damage being caused by data breaches is just enormous. You know, you see the latest headline and you think, it can't possibly get any worse. The latest data breach, some disaster on the internet. And just when you think it can't get worse, you see the next headline. And it did get worse. Now, this is mind-boggling. You look at the companies in these headlines in the last few months, and you got to ask, why is this happening? You say, why didn't these companies defend themselves? And I don't think it's because the execs, the CISOs that work at these companies are stupid or careless. They're smart, and they are working hard, and they spend a lot of money to defend themselves. I think partly the problem is that we're up against some very well-funded, very large, and very determined adversaries. You know, we're well past the days when it's the prototypical hacker in the garage trying to impress their friends by bringing down or corrupting a website. You know, we're up against political hacktivism, where you have millions of people that are loosely affiliated that wittingly or unwittingly participate in attacks. You've got state-sponsored activities from some of the largest countries in the world with, you know, unlimited resources, very smart people, and they're very determined. You've got cybercrime, which is huge. there's a lot of money being made through cybercrime today. Account theft, just costing the banks hundreds of millions and billions of dollars now. So there are adversaries very determined and very capable, and that's tough to go up against nation states and organized crime. Now, another major challenge is that on the internet, it's a lot harder to defend yourself than it is to attack. All it takes is a slight hole, an unpatched server, an employee clicks on the wrong link, and you're toast. It's just so easy because the attacker can marshal large bot armies and probe every possible way, one way in, and you're done. So it's really hard to defend yourself. Now, what makes it even harder is that even the protocols we use to defend ourselves, think OpenSSL, as basic as it gets, they have vulnerabilities. The Heartbleed incident is just striking in that for 3.5 years, the protocol we use, that you all use for encryption, had a very easy to exploit vulnerability that wasn't known in the open. And you have to wonder, it was so easy to exploit, did governments know? Did organized crime know? And the very basic protocols for security have vulnerabilities, so it becomes even harder for you to defend yourself. Phishing attacks, spear phishing, are getting really, really good. This is an example. They know I go by Tom, not my first name, which is Frank. They know Akamai's chief security officer, their name. That's Andy Ellis. They know I've got a complete routine training for security. And Tom, just please click on this link to do it. Boy, I want to click on that link. Now, this is actually training.akarnai.com. But, my eyes aren't so good if I don't have the glasses on. Click. Disaster. All right, now we've since bought that domain, so we can't use that one anymore. But this is a problem. You cannot, no matter how much training you do, you are going to have people go to the wrong place, click on the wrong link, and that is very problematic. And finally now, IoT. We'll talk more about IoT a little bit later. Just amazing potential, but also amazing potential to cause harm. There are literally billions of devices being connected with a strong CPU, a full communication stack, and they're getting connected to all that bandwidth at the edge of the internet in the last mile. And they don't have security. Often, if they've got a password at all, it's known to everybody. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, or something simple. And that means that the people who want to do harm can take over these devices and create massive bot armies that have access to huge amounts of bandwidth. And they can create very large denial of service attacks. They can be used to run account stuffing, account takeover attacks. They can be used to do whatever the bad person wants to do. It's just enormous computing power at their disposal. And that's a big problem. We're seeing that already with the scale of denial of service attacks. As Buhan mentioned, earlier this year, we saw an attack go way beyond a terabit per second. Now, this is going to get even worse because we have, remember, this enormous capacity imbalance. The IoT devices, which get taken over, ultimately have access to tens of thousands of terabits per second of capacity to launch attacks. The core of the internet has nowhere near that much. And ultimately, you're going to see attacks with even bigger and bigger bot armies with more and more volume. And here's sort of the curve we're on. We're already at over a terabit per second of traffic. And again, you got to think, okay, what is a terabit per second? What does that mean? You ask any security person and they go, oh my goodness, that's huge. And it is. It's enough to overwhelm any cloud data center, any of them. It will take it down. It's enough to overwhelm the bandwidth coming into most countries. Not all, but most. Large nations might have a few terabits per second of capacity through the gateways into the country. And so if an attack is launched to do that, you can start disconnecting and isolating many countries around the world. This is a problem even at a terabit per second. But what's coming and likely to happen is way more than that, because you can take over these devices that have access to so much more capacity. This is a big challenge, and so the only way to defend yourself is, at the edge. We are past the point in time when you can defend yourself at a cloud data center or with the traditional model of a corporate data center. There is simply not enough capacity that you can get to defend yourself. And even if you could provision it, you couldn't afford it anymore to tolerate large attacks. In fact, this is why even the big cloud companies use Akamai to defend themselves, because we intercept that traffic out at the edge of the internet where there is the capacity. The same servers that are used to distribute the World Cup or big sporting events is the same capacity we use to intercept the attack traffic where it starts. So it never gets near your data center. If it ever gets near your data center, you're going to be toast today. And we place our application firewall, our web application firewall called Kona, in those same servers. So not only are we absorbing the scale of the attacks for DDoS, we're also filtering out all the malicious stuff at the application layer. So your applications don't get compromised. Your data doesn't get stolen. Now, most recently, we have added our Bot Manager software to that defensive shield. Now, a lot of people don't think about it, but today, most of the traffic for many of our customers is not human anymore. It's bot. Now, some of the bots are okay, like a Google search bot. That's fine. A lot of them aren't. And the nastiest bots today are the account stuffers, the ones that are taking stolen credentials and seeing if they work on your site. And if they do work, then the credentials get sold to organized crime that exploit it. Maybe they buy something on the account. Maybe if it's a bank account, they empty the funds and steal the money. And these bots are very sophisticated. And so we've had to go to great lengths now to be able to tell the difference between a human and a bot, including monitoring as people log into banks and commerce sites how you hold the device in your hand, how it moves around. When you tap it, the pattern of your taps, does your hand move as you tap it? If you move your mouse, how do you move it? And we record this for billions and billions of transactions and use machine learning to decide, is it a bot or is it human? And if you want to see this in action, if you go out to the booths out there, one of the booths has the Bot Manager Premier demo, and this, you'll see it in action. And in fact, this is happening to your devices today behind the scenes. You just don't know it because our customers now, starting with banks and commerce companies, are adopting this capability so that bots, the companies of bots that have stolen your password can't use it to get into your bank account. We've had great success with this new capability. This is a case study from one of the world's largest banks. They were losing 8,000 customer accounts per month, bank accounts per month, to these bots. It was costing them tens and tens of millions of dollars a year, plus you have 100,000 unhappy customers every year because their accounts got hacked and their money taken. They turned on Bot Manager Premier, this capability, and we stopped the bank fraud. 8,000 to 1 or 2 per month. Just an enormous success story. And that's been going on now for about a year. This is from a big regional airline, and they were getting hammered by bots to check pricing for seats. And every time you do a check on a flight, they had to go to the reservation engine and see was their seat available and what the price was. And that's their biggest cost. And it turned out that 80% of their traffic was bots, often from their competing airlines from some countries in the region. And so they turned on Bot Manager, and it cut their cost by a factor of 5. It also kept the bots from reserving and blocking up seats for the airline. And as a result, Akamai became Vendor of the Year for this customer. Here's another one that's regional. We see this, of course, across the world. When you have a big sporting event that you're selling tickets for it, or a big other kind of event like Broadway musical in New York, or sometimes if you're a clothing manufacturer or you make sneakers and you have special promotions, what happens is organized crime and sort of the black market comes in, scalpers come in with bots and buy up all the tickets, buy up all the sneakers. And then they resell them later online at a higher price point. And this is very bad because it means the ticket agency can't sell tickets to users. They're just getting bought up by scalpers. The apparel manufacturer can't sell their sneakers to real users. They're getting bought by a criminal organization and then sold for more money later. Very bad for the customer experience. And Bot Manager stops this. And we see that, in this example, 90% of the tickets were being bought by bots. We have a very famous sneaker company or apparel company where 99.9% of the traffic was bots trying to buy up the inventory. I want to say just a few words about Zero Trust. Buhan mentioned this. We are now, I think, at the cusp of a revolution in enterprise security. As you all know, the traditional model to protect yourselves is you have a firewall, you build a moat around the castle, you have your enterprise apps inside, you have a private network, costs a lot of money to maintain. It doesn't work anymore. It is just too easy for somebody to make a mistake that's on the inside and import malware. Once the malware is imported, the time to spread is measured in hours. The time to detect is measured in months. And this is a key reason why you see all those headlines for data exfiltration. Just way too easy to get on. And so there's got to be a different model, and it's called, by many, Zero Trust, because you can't trust anyone or anything. You need to treat your internal employees as if they were the public, because probably they've gone somewhere that the public goes and have gotten compromised. Akamai has products now, Enterprise Application Access, Enterprise Threat Protector, that enable you to provide a zero trust architecture. We're in the early days. It's been the first year now of the services, and we're starting to have widespread customer adoption. And the data we're getting back is very compelling. This is one of the world's largest airlines. They turned on the solution, and in the first week, they identified dozens of internal trusted devices and trusted users that were attacking their internal applications. All right? They had no idea that all these devices had been compromised. But when you turn on Akamai's Zero Trust solution, we are applying the same level of scrutiny to the traffic that the internal users are driving against your internal apps as we would outsiders. So we're looking for all the bad things your internal users might be doing. We're also looking what all your devices are doing. And in fact, we've now seen this situation come up in several of our customers where the HVAC system had been compromised. And, people often don't even think about the HVAC system, the air conditioning system, being connected. But of course, everything is connected now. And somebody in the company wanted to be able to control the temperature on their internal network, so it got connected. And of course, it has a state-of-the-art CPU, and it probably doesn't have security. So a virus got imported, found its way through the internal network into the HVAC system. That's where it set up shop, collected all their sensitive corporate data, and was in the process of exfiltrating it to the botnet. And we caught it doing that because we're monitoring all the internal communications to make sure nothing like this is happening. All right, I want to conclude by saying a few words about some futuristic areas that we've been working very hard on and are now bringing products to market, starting with IoT. I think, as you all know, billions of people, tens of billions of devices, and countless petabytes of information are all getting connected. And people expect instantaneous and intelligent access. And the cloud, the core cloud, is really struggling to keep up here. IoT is in its infancy, but has tremendous potential, just in multiple verticals, things that you could think about doing when everything gets connected. But there's challenges. Scale. How do you manage hundreds of millions of devices? How does one company manage hundreds of millions of devices that always need a connection? It's got to perform. Many of these environments, you've got to have near zero, few milliseconds of latency. Security, as we talked about, is a major problem when you have all these devices because most of them aren't secured. And then cost. How do you manage this cost effectively? And the cloud struggles here, but here is where the edge network, where you got the capacity, you got scale, and you're close to the devices, can really make a big difference. And so we've now building the IoT Edge platform. It supports the IoT communication protocols. We'll have container support at the edge for your business logic and your metadata. Bidirectional security for the IoT devices. Those devices themselves may not be secure, but if we can route the communications through us, we can help prevent them from getting compromised and prevent them from doing damage elsewhere if they do get compromised. And of course, low latency, because we're close to the devices, and massive scale. The first areas where this is being used are in automotive. The major car companies today, there's 70 million connected cars. A typical new car has 70 functions that are tracked. And as you have more autonomous driving and real-time interaction with a car, latency of communications becomes very important. And they always want the car to be connected when it's on. So you're managing 70 million if the cars were all on, but tens of millions are at a given time that have to be simultaneously connected. The next area that we're working on is consumer electronics, gaming. You know, the big gaming companies want the game console always connected. And to be able to group classes of players together so people can wake up and play with their friends and it's just always on. And again, 130 million concurrent connections is a big deal. You're not going to do that in a cloud data center. Here again is where you need, the edge network. Blockchain. There's a good buzzword there. I do think blockchain is poised to revolutionize the financial payment and transaction landscape. Now, traditional blockchain has challenges. It's based on the concept of proof of work, and inherently it can't scale. But at Akamai, we have developed a version of blockchain using digital cryptography that has a notion of proof of authority instead of proof of work that is well poised to scale. I think blockchain will be used by the financial transaction industry to modernize their ledger systems. Cashless transactions. I think governments in many parts of the world are highly motivated to move to a cashless digital currency world. Gives them a little bit more control, some handle on maybe illegitimate activity. Again, you got the same challenges. Scale. If every transaction, anytime somebody pays somebody else, if you're doing that online, that's a big scale problem. You got to have instantaneous performance. Trust is a huge issue, and of course, cost. And again, here the Edge platform is ideally suited to meet these challenges. And with the Akamai blockchain platform, we're able to process many millions of transactions a second. We can do an end-to-end latency of 2 seconds from the time you swipe the card at the soda machine to when it's totally recorded. Do it globally, and to maintain control of the data and to make sure that you have security. Now, we're first bringing this capability to market in a partnership with Mitsubishi, MUFG in Japan, with a goal of handling financial transactions, beginning to do that in Japan in early 2020. Today, as Buhan mentioned, we have an edge platform with 250,000 servers inside 1,700 networks, not peering, but inside, past the peering points that have congestion. Nearly 4,000 locations in over 130 countries. We're delivering over 2 trillion items per day. Typical traffic now, actually, many days over 60 terabits per second. And we do this for most of the world's major brands, including here in Asia and in Korea here. In Korea, over 2,000 servers inside 16 networks in 30 locations. We do 50 billion deliveries per day here in Korea. Typical traffic levels here at 2 terabits per second. We have 1,700 customers in Asia, Pacific, and Japan, and as Buhan mentioned, over 200 customers here in Korea. And we very much appreciate your business and your partnership. So thank you very much.